I'm going to do the introduction to today's video in under 30 seconds. Why? Because my topic is using a ticking clock to add urgency and excitement to your storyline designs. The players have a set period of time with which to complete a task, or bad things happen. And the key here is to maintain a semblance of verisimilitude with a plot device that is prone to stretching our suspension of disbelief. And the key is to create a set of circumstances which makes the ticking clock make sense. And how you do that is... Hello again, folks. KR King here, helping one and all homebrew their own D&D campaign. So I was cut short on my intro to give you the key to a plausible ticking clock device. And it was a bit of a tease because, in fact, it's a process more than just, a keyword or phrase involved in creating that plausibility for a ticking clock, such as the players believe in at least the idea behind it, if not the reality in the world of D&D. And for me, that process means that you have a clear understanding of how the ticking clock is working in your storyline, the type of ticking clock that you're using, and then to create a plausible explanation so that whoever or whatever created this countdown situation makes sense. And I'm going to go over some basic types of these ticking clock scenarios with the understanding that there are other styles. There's combinations, for instance, choice exhaustion storyline where you can combine these. There's all sorts of different elements to these, but I'm just going to go over kind of the two basic types that I use most often. And basically what those two options for me are is if you have a fixed, or hard deadline to your ticking clock, or you have a variable or soft deadline. And what that basically means is with a fixed deadline within a number of weeks, days, or hours, time is up and something happens. Whereas with a variable, there may be an opportunity to change this timeline, or it's dependent on something else, other figures in your world or something like that, such that it could be, sped up or slowed down, or it doesn't start until a set of circumstances comes to pass. So what often determines whether you're going to use a fixed or variable timeline for a ticking clock scenario is the set of circumstances. What is it exactly that is going to cause this event to happen? So the classic ticking clock device is a time bomb. James Bond goes in and he has to figure out which wire to snip as the counter goes down, or we hear a voice saying, 10 seconds to destruction, and potentially hundreds of thousands of people might die. And a time bomb in D&D is not only a classic form of storytelling, but it's very much expanded when you have a world where magical forces are real. Because you can have a magic item or spell that acts pretty much like a time bomb, explodes with magic energy or psionic, necrotic, whatever it is. But you can also have a magic item that could prevent or cause some sort of natural disaster, a volcanic eruption, a tsunami, or the imminent invasion from another plane. But as you step away from a literal clock, the timer onto a bomb, into the world of magic items, you got to come up with plausible explanations why someone or thing would create this sort of device or how it came to be. In the real world, a volcanic eruption is just part of the process of plate tectonics. But in the world of D&D, you have elemental forces, deities, and whatnot that can influence when and why a volcano erupts. And check out my 2 videos on using volcanoes in your campaign for a much more detailed analysis of that. And a key aspect to the fixed ticking clock is almost always the moment of truth. When it goes off is beyond the player's control. Whereas a variable, obviously the players can make actions to delay this, a set of circumstances such that they have more time. The other thing you might have is a multi-part ticking clock such that, it's going, but the players are searching for various items or spells or something such that they can delay it for a certain amount of time. But at some point, they're either going to have to go to the clock and stop, clip those wires or else. And the idea there is this makes it a longer storyline than just going in as James Bond does, and he has like 10 seconds to make a decision. And it's interesting here that you could have a variable ticking clock such that you've baked into the concept the fact that if they do this, it slows down, or they get this item or whatever. They still haven't necessarily stopped it. But you can also allow for player creativity If they come up with something, the volcano, it's about to go down, and they somehow negotiate with fire elementals to do something to delay it, you do want to reward player creativity, but you don't want to destroy the integrity of your ticking bomb. You don't want the players to think when there's a countdown, they're running out of time. We just think of something that, the GM would never, oh, it's really cool and creative, and he'll just say, oh, okay. If there's a gun on stage, someone has to shoot it. Now, of course, if it's your campaign style to have the players coming up with stuff and really affecting the storyline, that's fine. The other way you can have player creativity, do something really wacky with a hard and fast ticking clock is if it's a one-shot. If you're just doing it with, characters we just rolled up for this and they have the ticking clock and it's obvious they're not figuring it out, you can allow for that. The other thing, of course, is you can blow up the world in one of those and nobody cares. And then there's the variable clock in which you are racing against a group of other, NPCs, creatures, forces, whatever, instead of merely against time. So you have an evil cult that's discovered a gateway to a plane in which if it's opened, their demons they worship will flood the material plane. But they need to find a final piece of the puzzle, which the players find out about, and they're racing to find it as well. Within the gate, there's one stone piece missing, an amulet or something. If placed in and turned, the gate will be open. So here we have a situation where until the piece is found, everything is going to stay status quo. We don't have a ticking clock per se until they find this, and then it's who can get there first. The cult putting it in, the players stopping them. And of course, you can complicate this with a multi-step approach. If you put the amulet in and turn it, a ticking clock begins, much like the bomb is placed at Fort Knox and then set to go. And now you've got a very short period of time. This is just literally an encounter type length of time. And the beauty of this approach is it guarantees a final confrontation between the cultist and the players. And of course, this conflict can continue. The players find the stone amulet. Now they've got to find someone to guard it or protect it because the cultists are going to continue to search for it. And destroying something that powerful might be tough. And as I said, the key here is that you have a variable set of circumstances that goes into the ticking clock. And then once those are completed, now the countdown begins. For instance, it could be that if this is placed in the gate, once there is a blood moon or something like that, some natural event, it goes off, so the players have time to either remove that or find some item which neutralizes the amulet in the gate. And the key here is it allows you as a GM to use a ticking clock thing that you can use over many sessions of, this thing is done and then that. But then finally at the end, you have the true ticking clock countdown where it's just a frenzied, single session. So we have our fixed clock and our variable. The fixed is just, you got 30 days to do something or the gateway is open, the volcano erupts, whatever. And then the variable where you've got to find different parts, you're competing against someone, something occurs after a set period of time. Now you want to think about what is the resolution of the ticking clock device, both good or bad, right? If the players fail, what happens? And if they succeed, what happens? So if they fail, is the world destroyed? Kind of an end of campaign. Those are high stakes. That can be very exciting. But do you want to end your campaign? And the problem with the end of the world scenario is it really gets you as a GM to potentially fudge things if the players just aren't either figuring out what they're supposed to do or, it's clear that they don't have the time to finish this because you don't want to end the world. So if you're going to have some cataclysmic event, it's better to have one sort of corner of the world that you've created screwed up, and the players do have an opportunity, one, to go to another area of the world to operate, and perhaps two, reverse the effect through doing another set of circumstances. But if you have more mundane outcomes, it can just kind of suck. If it's just a race for a great treasure or some item, and the players lose, it sucks for them. Maybe they would continue to compete against this group, but it's not like the end of the world or thousands die. What's important here is to maintain the integrity of your ticking clock. If the players don't figure out which wire to cut, boom. Now, what you can do with a multi-step ticking clock is you can mitigate this outcome. If the players need to collect 4 items, they only collect 3. The event occurs, but it's not as serious as it would have been if all 4 items had been used. And then there's the law of unintended consequences, which will lend verisimilitude to your world in terms of what happens when the players succeed in disarming the ticking clock. So they shut down a volcanic eruption that has been long delayed by some magical device, saving the town or city or whatever, but various elemental forces, demigods, even gods are furious.
Who has dared defy me?
These things are not allowed to happen as it's been set up. If the players prevent some curse from occurring over some area, such that, like Barovia with the Curse of Strahd, who was behind this curse? What was the purpose? It punishing some person with some transgression, and here the players step in trying to help the villagers, but, do they get mad? In other words, will the players put a target on their backs for winning, against the ticking clock? And then finally we have the, concept that I promised in my opener, how to make the creation of a ticking clock device and its outcome plausible in the world of D&D. Why would some entity or creature or whatever create a ticking clock? And then how does it work within the game mechanics of D&D? So think about a classic time bomb of James Bond in which Goldfinger creates an atomic bomb that he's going to put into Fort Knox. He's going to irradiate all the gold there, which will then make his gold unbelievably valuable. This concept has storytelling plausibility, even though the means of actually doing this is ridiculous. A fleet of supermodel pilots flies over Fort Knox with knockout gas. And why is there a timer on the bomb? Because Goldfinger has to get the bomb into Fort Knox, start the timer, and then have enough time to get out. And again, he doesn't start the final countdown until he's got the bomb there. So in a D&D sense, where the players are creating the story, in theory, you could prevent him from ever getting the bomb there, ever starting the process of a countdown. Whereas in a script or story, it's all written out. It's all just presented as is. All right, so what is a plausible explanation for a time bomb style ticking clock in the world of D&D? Well, if we look at our volcano example, there could be, a magic force that's been placed over this to seal the lava. And now that magic, needs a recharge to continue to hold forth this lava dome. And of course, you have to think about, well, then why would the players, go there and do this? James Bond, that's his job. He's a secret agent. Maybe you run a heroic campaign where the players discover that this village or city or whatever is going to just be destroyed by this volcano. It was a promise to them they could live there long ago. They, did something for the gods, whatever the explanation, and they just take it upon themselves. We have to stop this from happening. But, you can also dangle a reward for the players to stop some ticking clock, some treasure they're going to get, or make it personal. It's some area where one or two of the player characters grew up. You can also create a fixed ticking clock scenario that actually took a whole series of steps before the players got involved. The cult has been collecting items to open their gate for years. Now they just need one more in order to activate it. And it might simply be once they find the item, boom, it starts. And the players have to get involved and prevent this. And why does the cult want to open the gate? Well, it might just increase necrotic magic on the material plane by 10 times and reduce forms of divine or even arcane magic, 10 times less. And if the players fail, they're going to have to deal with that change in the magic structure until they can figure out a way to reverse the effect. And obviously, a lot of other, sentient creatures and whatnot are going to be interested in this. The other thing you can do with something like that is, okay, the players failed. The gate is open, the necrotic managed, but maybe it starts to accelerate slowly. It's like the filling of a dam or something. So even though everybody's down, a certain level of spell levels they have, or certain, necrotic spells get an extra die, arcane or divine gets less. It's a slow process, which gives the players some time to sort of reverse the effect. And of course, you don't have to have this effect cover the entire material plane. It could start very small, even the size of a village, maybe one hex, using a hex style mapping, but it's going to begin to spread. And this becomes a ticking clock as well. Is there a tipping point through which it won't be possible to reverse this effect? And all of this points to another game mechanic that lends plausibility to a ticking clock scenario, and one that I recommend in many other ways in terms of running your game, which is keeping track of time. You need to know how long the players have to mitigate or end the effect, and you have to set up the scenario such that it's plausible that they do have the time. So James Bond, once Goldfinger turns the bomb on and locks him in the vault, he's only got a few minutes to, snip the right wire. And of course, he's also going to deal with odd job. So if the players have to travel to some dungeon to discover some item, then go to the volcano and the temple of the fire god to place the item in to prevent the eruption, you got to make sure that they have enough time to accomplish these tasks and then cut it really close. A leisurely ticking time bomb scenario just doesn't have as much excitement as one where you know that you have a very set period of time that's short. The classic frog that's slowly in the boiling water doesn't know that it's about to die. It's not that interesting. But as I said, if you have a ticking clock that doesn't start until that moment when all of the various items are collected, you can have a leisurely sort of long-term thing. The players might not even know. They just know something's afoot and whatever. And then they begin to discover, oh my God, if all these things are put together, we only have X number of days before something bad happens. Now they have to go into high gear. But don't have them, 1,000 miles away unless they have abilities to teleport or something like that. They need the time very close to stop the clock. All right, so there you have some ideas on how to think about a ticking clock scenario, the fixed versus the variable, how to mix and match those to create plausible and exciting storylines for your players. And if you like my content, please subscribe to my channel. Please leave some comments. Most importantly, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.